Well, good morning. This is from Melbourne, and it's the day after Australia Day. So, if you did enjoy yesterday, happy Australia Day to all here and abroad. This is Tom Padula from TomPadulaTV on YouTube and also Insegna Booksellers. And this morning, I think it's lesson 18 of world history. And we're moving from China to the Americas. Now, this is a very different approach here because there isn't much about the Americas apart from South America with the Maya, Inca and Aztecs civilizations. The actual settlement of North America and South America and how people got there is quite interesting. Because we have to go back to the last ice age and where there was sort of bridges between continents. It's very important, in fact, that the continents were able to be accessed from different places. So there are two types of thoughts here. How did people get to the Americas? We're not talking about Christopher Columbus here. We're talking about probably 40, 50, 60,000 years ago. Some people say, the Vikings got there, and before them there were the food gatherers and hunters. They followed the animals that went across the various bridges, land bridges, available at the time. So, and then of course, people could access the Americas also from water with boats. But we're talking about 20,000 years ago. I've read here. Let me read you something here. What this book says: the continents of America. No, I'm not going to do that yet. I'll have to wait a little bit because I'm having problems with my computer again. Not for anything, is because I want to show you something eventually, and unless I prepare it beforehand, the computer takes a long time to get going. So I'm doing a couple of things at the same time. But this morning, I really do want to go to the Americas. I want to have a particular conversation about America. Now, both North America and South America, with a view this time to South America, because there is more there's an actual civilization that developed there and in Central America. In North America, it looks like, there were food gatherers and hunters. They had smaller villages with the totems, the North American indigenous people, the Indians, what we call the Indians. Not from India, from North America. So there's there is something to do in order to get interested in all this. And we are very lucky today because we have, Google, we've got Wikipedia, we've got a lot of information, both in book form and online as well. So why am I doing this if it's everything there? Well, because we need to understand what history does for us individually. It's no good the knowledge being there in the books and online unless somebody actually talks about it. Welcome to Zoraida. I've started this particular lesson 18, I think. It's on South America, North America. So I'm talking about the Paleolithic age before the actual settlement of the Americas, which occurred. Some people say, most populations in the world were food gatherers and hunters. They were the Neolithic people, the Stone Age people. The Paleolithic people moved with the big animals that travelled all around the world. So if you're a hunter, you're chasing animals, so you follow where they go as well. So that's the interesting part of it all. The other thing, of course, being Australia Day yesterday, and I'll continue my readings of Australia under the Indigenous banners before what they call the invasion. Now, let's not forget that the Indigenous people of Australia too invaded Australia in the early days, food hunters and gatherers. So we all invade lands. These lands have been invaded by the people who first came to this world. We come not from chimpanzees, we come from small cells millions of years ago, which then developed. And if we look at my history lessons at the beginning, or the presentations from the beginning, I talk about the earliest part from the Big Bang Theory, when Earth was actually formed and there was no life on it. But there were these little cells that then became small fish, and then bigger fish, then reptiles, then other creatures, the mammals, and the chimpanzee, and then men and women sort of were able to walk on two legs. So they had their hands free, so they could start hunting and gathering things in a different way. And then, of course, from there, you get small groups forming, and the need to be led by someone, the way to hunt better, to produce, in agricultural terms. So all these things here are the basis for our modern history. And when people say, these lands have been invaded by the Europeans, this and that, well, they forget that originally everyone invaded somewhere on Earth. And what I'd like people to think is that there's no need to fight over all this, whose land it is, etc., etc., because really all of the world belongs to all humanity, and also to all the animals and vegetation that lives in it. So the climate change situation, we worry about it, etc. Well, that applies. That is important because it regards the world as one. Now, that was my introduction. I went a little bit over because with the Americas, I need to actually put in context, and I'll be doing also the songs at the end of it. Now, let's hope that everything that I've got here is available to me, and I'll start. So here we go. The discovery of America. Let me read you something. The continents of America were discovered by peoples from Asia they're called the types of people. I don't want to go into types of people, races. The people from Asia. Now, about 13,000 years ago, they say here. So they're talking about the Bering Straits that's in Alaska with Asia. You could walk across because of the ice was still melted as yet. So the Bering Straits, which separates Western Russia from Alaska, were crossed by these primitive hunters at the end of the last ice age. In the next 4,000 years, they occupied all the different climatic regions of both continents. That means Asia and America at the same time, reaching the southmost points of Patagonia before 7,000 BC. So we talked about, how I was interested the other day. I looked up Russia, the initial people who lived in the old USSR, Russia I call it, but it's really a lot of it's part of Asia, near Mongolia, further north. meantime, the so-called Indians of America remained hunters. So the North American Indians became hunters, remained hunters. Whether they lived in the tundra, the prairies, or in the tropical forests. So regardless whether people lived, these people lived in Canada and in North America, they remained food gatherers and hunters. But on the high plateau of Mexico and the mountains of the Andes, some Indians became farmers, growing maize as the main crop. Corn, maize. That was their main crop. And it's still big in America. You know, that's where hamburgers come from. And even meat, they feed the animals, a lot of corn. Between 1500 BC and AD 1500, they developed their unique civilization while remaining cut off from the rest of the world. We're talking about 3,000 years. 1500 BC, which was the Bronze Age in Egypt. Okay, and then 1500 after the birth of Christ, until Christopher Columbus got there. Or other people too, other navigators arrived in America. Different people arrived in America. Columbus arrived in some of the islands. He actually didn't touch the main part of the Americas, the main continent. And he still thought, after so many voyages, 3 or 4 of them, that he had discovered a route to India, to Asia. Well, that wasn't the case. So it was other people. Amerigo Vespucci actually said that this was a different continent altogether. So between 1500 BC and they developed a unique civilization while remaining cut off from the rest of the world. Now that was one theory. Then the other one is that the Vikings arrived after. They also arrived after, and they also, arrived in America through the north, but they didn't remain there. Whatever they did, a lot of this civilization, a lot of these people who arrive in new lands, they didn't necessarily survive as a civilization. If things go wrong, you can't stay there. I mean, if you do, you die off, and that's it. And unless you have writing or other, you've got to make discoveries. But now, since the year 2000, with all this new technology that we have, they're discovering a lot of things in North America and South America that putting a different span on the discoveries of the various parts of America and who they became. So we have all the tribes, the Indian tribes, the indigenous tribes of North America. There's a lot of them. I've looked them up. There are 50 different states just in the United States, and then you've got Canada as well. But in the center, in Mexico and further down, they developed three. There were three main civilizations. Let me see if I can go back here. I've got something here I can show you. Let me see. Let me see if I can. Here it is. I'm going to show you. There we are. See that? The pink one was the May. That was, Nicaragua and all that. The red ones are the Aztecs. And the Inca is the one in the Andes. And then you've got all the other green part. Well, we don't know much about that, the Amazons and all that. Presumably, the three civilizations probably had excursions into this particular part of South America. North America we know. Okay, South America, we don't know, we don't know much. The history books haven't given me much information about, you've got to go and look up the Aztecs, the Maya and the Incas civilizations if you are interested in knowing a little bit more about our world history. World history is important because it brings us together as a humanity. I had my son saying, talk about the tennis this morning, talk about Australia Day, what are you worried about the world for? Well, I said, because whatever happens here and now is part of the whole. And I am interested in the finer details, of course, but I want to push along the idea that in order to achieve peace, you have to understand, we have to understand as humans that all the lands in the world, all the fighting we do about land belongs to everybody. Just because you say this is mine doesn't necessarily mean it is yours. You're only here for a few centuries, maybe. Civilizations come and go. And the people who are the victims of civilization, they're the ones who have to think hard about all this. I've got here something. Where did I put it? Here it is. It's a book called Cultural Anthropology. So what happens here is that you end up, say, for example, the impact of the West on small-scale societies. The impact. How do people impact other societies? The impact of the West on small-scale societies produced phenomena of physical and cultural destruction that had parallels in earlier empires, as we have noted. But they were in many respects new in human history. So the impact, when it's direct impact, the people who have that impact become part of the victim culture as well. So they develop together. But this one here is from far away. What happened to tribal peoples in the path of European expansion depended on a number of factors. And here are the number of factors. The size, political organisation and technology of the society subjugated. The time period of initial subjugation and consequently the goals Europeans were pursuing and the technology they commanded. So there was a superior type of armaments, etc. The location of the society in terms of remoteness or ease of access and of the desirability to Europeans of the territory they occupied. So were they interested in the land they were occupying and taken away, stealing, if you like, whatever you want to call it. The cultural orientation of the subjugated people relative to European culture and what Europeans wanted from and demanded of them. And that's what their governments do to us. They demand certain things. And if we don't do it, then, you can actually be punished if you go too hard against it. And 5, the colonial policy of the colonizers, which has varied in different times and places from ruthless extermination to benevolent paternalism. So that's your cultural anthropology. That's what happens in a small scale. But this is only a little bit of a study that I am going into now. What do I want my listeners to do? I want you to look up the Aztecs, the Inca, and the Maya civilizations. Look up also the Paleolithic movements across the Americas. the creation of the various tribal Indian tribes and which ones they are, identify them. Then you can go to Central America and have a look what happened there, because there is actual evidence of cities being built there. And also South America. So that's where we are. Now, talking about South America, I was talking about the Vikings before. The Vikings. Let me read you a little bit about the Vikings, and then I'll go on to the Aztecs, etc., and the Maya. As far as we know, the Vikings from Norway were the only people who found their way to America during this period of 3,000 years. That's 1,500 BC to 1,500 AD, in that period frame. But before that, there were already people in the Americas from around 15,000 years before. And before that, maybe during, after the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, there were people who had migrated to the continents from all over the place. They were all over the world. They followed animals, and then they got stuck. They got isolated by the waters rising, the warming up. There's a problem here with our planet. It can warm up as well as it can get cold. So you can have an ice age after a warm period. So the climate, people, climate change people should study these things as well. I don't know. I just, it's a reflection. Again, a lot of reflections that are based what some people call fake news. I don't want to do fake news because I call it as it is. I don't know. I actually don't know. And, people need resources to find out. And then even then, it's not always the case. But people put a lot of work into what they do. Of course, they want some credit for their discoveries. So, the Viking saga tells the story of their expeditions. Here we go. They had settled on remote Iceland in AD 874. So basically, the Vikings and the Russian populations, in the cold strip of the earth further north, under the North Pole, were sort of settled by people around, before the year 1000 AD. So let's talk about 500 AD after Christ to 1000. In that period of time, there were further settlements up north. And the Viking civilization, or the Vikings villages were created then. And they also were very good navigators. That's why they're tough. We've got a series on television called The Vikings, very brutal. But also, as we're learning now, you can have the reactions can be that you brutalize the people that you conquer, or you can become paternalistic towards them. In other words, you try to help them out, and you sort of come together. That's what's happened during the Roman times, up to time when Rome became Christian. They took over the actual Christianity. That's about 4 centuries after the birth of Christ. So for 300 years, the Christians were martyred in the Colosseum. They were killed, no respect. But then eventually they sort of became the dominant area. And then they became tough as well. And the Crusades, the period of the Crusades shows that. Now, again, I haven't covered all that yet, but look how much interest there is once we get past the year 1000 BC, before Christ. But so far, I've actually covered all the area from the Big Bang Theory up to 5,000 years before the birth of Christ, with China, Sumer, Indus Valley, etc., now North America as well, and South America. So, they had, the Vikings had settled on remote Iceland in AD 874, and an expedition led by Eric the Red reached Greenland in 982, just a few years before the year 1000. Aaron's son, Leif the Lucky, reached the mainland of America about 20 years later and called his discovery Vinland. Remains of Viking settlements were discovered recently in Newfoundland, but the area Leif called Vinland, with its wild grapes and mild climate, must have been further south on the mainland of North America. These settlements do not seem to have survived for long, and other Europeans knew nothing about them. There was not writing, they weren't told, etc. Okay, so in the 15th century, when Portuguese and Italian sailors were discovering various groups of islands in the Atlantic, such as the Canaries and the Azores, they knew nothing about America until it was rediscovered. So you got a discovery, then you've got a rediscovery, then you've got people there before, during and after. More studies are required to know exactly what's happening in America. And I know that if you do a really good study of it, you will find out. Because now, if you focus on it with the current technology and the books, you got it. Let me have a look at the Aztecs, the Mayas, Aztecs and Incas. Several cultures flourished in Central and South America, from about 300 in the modern-day nations of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. Of the many early civilizations first living in this area, the Mayans, Aztecs and Incas are the best known and offer a broad understanding of early life in these areas. The Mayans. The Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and Belize, in Central America, Latin American, Caribbean physical geography, etc., were home to the ancient Mayan civilization, which originated in about 2600 before the birth of Christ, rose to prominence in about 300 and collapsed around 900 after. Although often studied as an empire, the Mayan civilization was not a united society, but rather a group of 20 culturally similar independent states. So that's the Mayan, 20 similar independent states. And here, when we talk about the Aborigines here, the indigenous people of Australia, what I've read is about 150 separate little areas of land belonging to different groups of indigenous people. Mayans created a highly developed culture with systems of writing, calendars, mathematics, astronomy, art, architecture, and religious, political, and military order. That's unbelievable. I didn't know any of this. Mayans constructed beautiful stone cities and religious temples without the use of metal tools or the wheel. They never discovered the wheel in South America. They carried everything on their backs. Since these tools had not yet been discovered by their culture, much about Mayan culture is lost forever. The tropical climate of Mexico did not preserve the tree bark books buried with priests, and the Spanish conquerors and missionaries of the 1500s burned or destroyed the remnants of Mayan culture that they found, because they wanted everyone to be Christians. And I'm sure that's really anti-Christian. Christ would not have done things like that. That's not Christianity. That's in the name of Christ, but it's not Christianity. When they burnt this what happens in Alexandria in 400, when Rome took over Christianity as the state religion, then the Christian became really, really rough, and they burnt most beautiful, huge library in Alexandria of all of Egypt's history, and North America, the knowledge of the times, including the Greeks and the Cretan civilizations. So, and the Spanish conquerors and missionaries of the 1500s burned or destroyed the remnants of Mayan culture that they found. Nevertheless, archaeologists, people who study the physical remains of past cultures, continue to reveal new aspects of this ancient civilization through present-day excavations or scientific digs. That's what they're doing at the moment. They are looking things up. The Aztec Empire reigned in present-day central Mexico for nearly 1 century until 1519, when disease and brutality brought by Spanish conqueror Hernan Cortés, 1485-1547, destroyed it. Originated from a small group of poverty-stricken wanderers, the Aztec Empire developed into one of the largest empires in the Americas. At its height, the Aztec empires consisted of a ruling class of Aztecs with nearly 15 million subjects of different cultures living in the 500 different cities and towns. Amazing. 15 million. 500 different cities and towns, like modern times. The Aztecs followed a demanding religion that required human sacrifices, wrote poetry, engineered huge stone temples, devised 2 calendars, one for the days of the year and another for religious events, and developed a system of strict laws that covered all aspects of life, including what clothes a person could wear. The Aztec culture was swiftly overcome in the 1500s, when the Spanish conquerors, with thousands of Mexican allies who wished to destroy the Aztecs, began battles that, along with the spread of smallpox and often fatal, highly infectious viral disease, would ruin the Aztec empire by 1521. So, you notice what are we suffering today from? The pandemic, viral disease. That's what killed a lot of the people in South America, the Aztecs people. That's the 15 million people there. But what does that tell you about the Aztec culture? That was a very strict, rough type of culture. Human sacrifice. So the leaders would just pick up somebody and says, burn, do this. I've seen some very gory films of South American cultures. Unbelievable. Now let's have a look at the Incas, and then I'll be finished. The Inca, this is an empire, spent a large portion of South America. By the late 1400s, although many different cultures prospered in the South American Andes Mountains before 3000 before Christ. The Incas developed their distinctive culture beginning in 12th century, so in other words, during the Bronze Age. And by 1471, we're talking about 2,600 years later, became the largest empire in South America, reigning over a region that stretched from modern-day Ecuador to Chile. Incas built roads, developed trade, created stone architecture, made beautifully worked gold, art and jewellery, became skillful potters and wove lovely fabrics. Much like the Aztecs, the Incas suffered from the attacks of Spanish conquerors and the spread of smallpox. In 1532, Spaniard Francisco Pizarro, 1475-1541, conquered the Incas, and the territory soon became a colony of Spain. And of course, they still speak now Spanish and Portuguese in South America. They've got their own version of the lingo, but it is another invasion. While the Mayans, Aztecs and Incas each had distinct clothing traditions and costumes, many similarities exist. In the broadest terms, these cultures wore the same types of clothing styles, but the different ways they decorated their skin, adorned their hair and patterned their fabric, among other daily habits, made them quite distinct. So, I've done South America and North America. I would like to do North American, the Indians, the Indian tribes of South America. There's a lot more to be done for South America and North America. Maybe I'll dedicate next week to North America, the Indians there, and Canada as well. And then I'll move to the Vikings and Russia, because I want to cover all of the world. And I haven't mentioned Africa because apart from Egypt, the rest of Africa needs a mention. It's important. Very important that we cover the whole lot. And then, of course, there are also all the island groups, including Japan, including, you know, the many islands in the Pacific, in the Indian and Atlantic Ocean. So that's our world, including the North Pole and South Pole. More interest in the South Pole. By the way, Antarctica, I did some units on Antarctica in my teaching of history to young children, year 7 and 8 and 9 in the 1980s. So Antarctica for me has always been a very important place to visit, historically speaking. Very interesting area. So these are the notes that are acquired because, you know, you have to do your homework. You can't just talk about it. And as I said, I do not claim real knowledge here. The only knowledge that I have is the one I acquire from books, from what other people have done. And then I put my own spin on it in the sense of saying, okay, what is my original view of all this? I have experienced history, the teaching of history, the learning about history over, you know, a 60-year period, more, 65. Next month I'll be another year. Anyway, never mind. So that's it for South America. I'm glad that I've covered it because, you know, it's sort of these civilizations have been left behind in schools. Because unless you're local, you're not in, and unless you're of the main culture, civilization. Here we speak English in Australia. Therefore, all the other groups are secondary. Not secondary, they're part of the whole group. So the diversity is our unity. If there's only one or two groups, but here there's most nations of the world are represented in Australia. And Australia, apart from the fact that the indigenous people have been were not recognised until 1967, they were not included in the census. They didn't exist. Like the land, when Captain Arthur Phillip came here, put his flag there, and he said, "This is terra nullius, a land that belongs to nobody." And since then, look what happened. So let's have a look now. Let's go to our indigenous people here in Australia. Food in the tropical north. Last week, I've covered in the past. I've covered fishing, food in the desert, hunting, a few things. This one here is food in the tropical north. And this is from before the invasion textbook. Life on the seacoast in the tropical north was very different from life in the arid inland and desert areas. The Aborigines of Arnhem Land, for example, could be called rich. They had such a great variety of foods that for much of the year they could choose to eat what they liked best. Tropical north. All you got to do is lift your hand and you pick up a banana or whatever. Welcome to Angela Emila and Vincent Padula. In Arnhem Land, there were at least 40 plants which the Aborigines used for food. Another 20 edible plants grew there but were not eaten, though the Aborigines in Central Australia used such plants for food. The Arnhem Landers could be choosy. So some foods in some areas don't have to be used because you've got plenty of choice. One of my people that I knew says, and I'll say this in Italian, quando maggiore c'è, minore cessa. When there is more, the less ceases to be. When there is more, the lesser ceases to be. Quanto maggiore c'è, minore cessa. Good one. In the desert, game was scarce. Often it was the plant foods gathered by the women that kept the family fed. But on the coast of Arnhem Land, there was always a plentiful supply of food from the sea. The only time of year when such a food might be hard to get was in stormy, wet January, but it was so hot and humid then that people were not so active, and so they needed less food. Well, don't go up north in January. That's still the case now. The men caught plenty of fish, turtles and dugong in the open sea, and other fish and crocodiles in the rivers and estuaries. Crocodiles, good food. Crocodile food. I haven't tasted it yet. They also went inland now and then to hunt kangaroos. Kangaroo meat is also eaten now. Wallabies and other land animals. Women collected shellfish from the shallow waters in the great quantities, so these people had a diet rich in protein. And also they ate snakes, chopped the head. Dr. Betty Meehan, an anthropologist, lived for a year from July 72 to July 1973 with the Ambara people. They speak a language called Gidjingali or Jinjingali, and their territory is at the mouth of Blythe River, for which they use their own name, Anagachawana. Much nicer, the original names. During the year, the women collected 30 different kinds of shellfish, but 95% of the total weight was made up of 5 kinds, and the most popular kind made up over 60%, more than half. The women also collected nuts, fruits and other vegetable foods to vary the diet. The desert people move about often and hardly ever stay in one place for more than a week. A month is the longest time they would stay put, but the Ambara group had only 3 camps, sites in the 12 months that Dr. Meehan lived with them. And they stayed at one site for 7 months. It is no wonder that these people built much more permanent shelters and put more work into them than the desert people. So there you are. That's the Ambara people. And that's basically it there for our, a bit about before the invasion. So, if you study the various ways that people live, don't be fooled by money, trade, this and that. This is, we're talking about here, food gatherers and hunters, Neolithic people, Paleo, Neolithic. Until you built your villages and your cities, you don't move into what we call civilization in the way we see it. This one's here is more like, people who live through subsistence farming. That's how it is. Now, I've got here Benja Patterson, of course. We got from a bit of literature this time. A bit of literature. Here we go. Better have a drink first. The Road to Old Men's Town. I haven't translated this. I'm going to translate it. One of these days I will do it. Here it is in English. The fields of youth are filled with flowers. The wine of youth is strong. What need have we to count the hours? The summer days are long. Beautiful. But soon we find, to our dismay, that we are drifting down the barren slopes that fall away towards the foothills grim and grey, that lead to Old Men's Town. And may I include the Old Women's Town as well. Because when Benja Patterson says men, he also means women. But if you don't say it, then women don't exist. Poets, take note. And marching with us on the track, full many friends we find. So marching with us on the track full, many friends we find. Plenty. You know, a whole group of people that live with us. We see them looking sadly back, turn around, and they're all got this long thing. Where's youth gone? Do you remember when we were young? For those that dropped behind, and also the ones who dropped behind, the ones who die along the way. As they say, why am I still here? They went. And now when I look behind, boy, there are a lot of people that I know. Incredible number of people that have gone and never to return. And who knows, they're probably waiting for us now, up there somewhere. But God forbid a fate so dread, alone to travel down the dreary road we all must tread. With faltering steps and whitening head, the road to Old Man's Town. I'm not alone. I don't want to be. Go to dances, go to see people, go online, do something worthwhile. And above all, keep your heart and mind with optimism in them. Don't worry about what you read and etc., etc. You've got to face our human fate with some smiles. And I hope I'll keep on being smiling to the end. That's my wish. And when time comes, may I smile. Who knows, depending on how life hurts you. So the road to Old Man's Town. What a beautiful poem. And that's Benja Patterson. The fields of youth are filled with flowers, the wine of youth is strong. What need have we to count the hours, the summer days are long? But soon we find to our dismay that we are drifting down the barren slopes that fall away towards the foothills grim and grey that lead to Old Man's Town. And marching with us on the track, full, many friends we find. We see them looking sadly back for those that drop behind. But God forbid a fate so dread, alone to travel down the dreary road we must all tread, with faltering steps and whitening head, the road to Old Man's Town. There you are. So you can read it like that, but you need explanations with all these things. You do. Now, the last thing that I'm doing is, I love this part, not for anything, it's because, I don't know, the songs somehow are just beautiful, really. But I haven't done anything here from my computer. Maybe I'll see what I can do. I'll bring it back. Yeah, here we are. I've got the songs here. Let me see if I can find something really worthwhile. Oh, here we are. That's it. Keep going, Tom. There we are. There's a song here called Bella Belinda. Bella Belinda. Maybe a bit of Montemurro there. Okay. This one was called by Gianni Morandi. It's called Bella Belinda. I'll show it to you. Here, Bella Belinda. Okay, and notice, you know, because I do these songs, I use then these songs with my Italian class, because now we're almost there with the 9 parts of speech. So you should be able, if you follow me with the Italian, have a look at the adjectives, the nouns, etc. But this one here is just to have fun with. Bella Belinda. Bella Belinda è innamorata, parla da sola con l'insalata e non guarda il piatto ma la finestra, scende una lacrima nella minestra. Gioca col pane, bella Belinda, fa le palline con la mollica. Nel suo bicchiere, bella Belinda, lei vede i suoi occhi pieni d'amore e mille pensieri come farfalle e mille carezze sui suoi capelli e brividi dolci lungo le spalle e più è innamorata e più si fa bella. È unica al mondo, bella Belinda, scende le scale come volando e da romanzo, bella Belinda, vive l'amore e salta il pranzo. Then Belinda. Oh, I don't know how to. You'll have to look this one up in your YouTube channel. And talking about YouTube channel, after this, I'll talk about mine. E quando fa notte, bella Belinda, si copre tutto fino ai capelli. No, non è il vento, bella Belinda, sono i sospiri di chi ti pensa. E mille pensieri come farfalle, e mille carezze sui suoi capelli, e brividi dolci lungo le spalle, e più innamorata e più si fa bella. E bella Belinda è innamorata, parla da sola con l'insalata e non guarda il piatto ma la finestra, scende una lacrima nella minestra. Belinda. It's a beautiful song. And Gianni Morandi does a good job with this one. It's used in a lot of, in some of the clubs, but I haven't heard it for quite a while, Bella Belinda. So it's, people like a few of my friends who are, a few of my friends who are in the clubs, they should do Bella Belinda. It's a beautiful song to give to people who are dancing. It's a good rhythm to it. Okay, let's have a look. Mattinata Fiorentina. This one from Florence. I don't know whether you know it, I hope you do, but here we go. È primavera, svegliatevi bambine, alle cascine messer aprile fa il rubacuor. E a tarda sera, madonne fiorentine, quante forcine si troveranno sui prati in fior. Fiorin di noce, c'è poca luce, ma tanta pace. Fiorin di noce, c'è poca luce. Fiorin di brace, Madonna bice, non nega baci. Baciar le piace, che male c'è? È primavera, svegliatevi bambine, alle cascine messer aprile fa il rubacuor. È primavera, che festa di colori, Madonna e fiori tentaste il genio d'un gran pittor. E allora a sera fiorivano gli amori, gli stessi amori che adesso intrecciano i nostri cuor. Fiorin dipinto s'amava tanto nel 400, Fiorin dipinto s'amava tanto. Fiorin d'argento, Madonna amante, le labbra tinte, persin dal vento si fa baciare primavera, che festa di colori, Madonna e fiori, trionfo eterno di gioventù. Beautiful song, and you can see Mattinata Fiorentina. You'll have to go to Google it, and there are quite a few of the older singers of Italy sing it. Now, I didn't write anything down with Mattinata Fiorentina, and of course one can do better. This is a beautiful song, really. Mattinata Fiorentina. when you sing it, if you go into it. È primavera, svegliatevi bambine, alle cascine, messer aprile, fa il rubacuor, e a tarda sera, madonne fiorentine, quante forcine si troveranno sui prati in fior. See, you need the music as well. Oh, well, that's another one. Now, this one here, how are we going for time? It's good. We've got a couple of... I want to talk to you, before I do this one here, I want to talk to you about my YouTube channel, TomPadulaTV, on YouTube. Now, that's been upgraded now, and there are some sections there. The home page is the one that's very organised. In other words, you get different sections of my work. Then there is another one called channels. Those channels I've got, channels are like chapters in a book. So in other words, all the things that you find in home are divided, and I have to check it out because we've only improved it lately. So I'm quite excited about it. And also Quaila with Tom Padula now has got 36 series of Quaila with Tom Padula, which is a series that I developed in about 20 years ago. And it was amazing at the time because I went overseas and I filmed what people were doing in the streets. And I came here to Melbourne and put all that on community television, and I used to get up to 60,000 people watching. Community television, mind you. It's incredible. Then, of course, as time has gone on, the technology in the last 20 years are just amazing. I used to spend so much money on my programs from the early 90s, 3 cameras, this and that, all done. Oh, well, never mind. But the memories remain. So all that, what seemed to be misspent money was well spent. Because now I'm actually going to bring some of that work back, some of the things that were unfinished, I will bring it back. There's another song here called, this one here is in dialetto napoletano. So, storta va, dritta vena. Storta va, dritta vena. Te pare un mestiere, caston che sempre all'era, da che ho saputo che sto rovinata. E beh, mi so cagnata, mi son rassegnata, mo penso solo a me. I cure nerve miei con sta ricetta, e benedico a chi che l'ha fatta. So, it seems to you like a mystery that I am always happy. Why am I always happy? Da che ho saputo, since I found out that I'm ruined, I'm bankrupt. E beh, I changed myself. Mi so cagnata, mi son rassegnata. I've resigned to it. Okay, so I don't have any money. So what? Mo penso solo a me. Now I'm thinking only of me. I cure nerve miei, miele there, it must be mie. I cure my nerves with this recipe, and I bless the person who made it. Who wrote the recipe. Okay, so that's the first part. Storta va, dritta viene, sempre storta un pochi, spesso male porto bene, può tarda ma da venì. Non mi spostano anche femmine, si minacciano infamità, non mi piglia più l'ombra e collera, quanta felicità, quanta felicità. Sarà sto sole sta città, sarà sto mare che sta qua, sarà che io sape che sarà, che tutte guai mi fa scordare. Storta va, dritta viene, sempre storta un pochi. So, something goes wrong, it can't always go wrong, it comes straight sometimes. It can't go always wrong. The optimism's got to come in. Spesso male, often, whatever is bad, porto bene, brings you to good times. Può tardare, it can become late, but ma ha da venire. It will come. Non mi spostano anche femmine. Not even women will make me move from this idea of being happy. Se minacciano infamità. If they say, if you stop, like somebody stopped me in the street when I was going to uni and said, why do you always smile? I've been looking at you for 2 years. You always got a smile on your face. I said, it's a beautiful day. Look at the sky. The guy looked at me and walked away. Anyway, never mind. So, non mi spostano anche, non mi pigli più un'ombra e collera. I'm not going to worry about anything. Un'ombra, a shadow of cholera, of pain, or of anger. Quanta felicità, so much happiness, so much happiness. Saras tu sole sta città. It could be the sun and this city. Saras tu mare che sta qua. We're talking about Naples here, this sea. Sarà, chissà, che sarà, whatever happens. Che tutti guai mi fa scordare. All my worries makes me forget them. Storta va, dritta viene, sempre storta non poghi, spesso male porto bene, può tardare ma da venire. Non mi spostano ma anche femmine, si minacciano infamità. Let's go to the second one. The second bit. This one here, by the way, I looked at on YouTube, and none of them sing the second part. None of them sing this one here. Tu porti scritto in fronte, che chiagna e te tormenta, da quando concettina non ti aspetta. In una desretta facesse una vendetta per farla intossicare. Mi metterei a cantare sotto il balcone, sto ritornello a suono e mandolino. So, let's have a look. Tu porti scritto in fronte. You've written in your head. Che chiagna, that you're crying and you torment yourself from when Concettina, your lover, is not waiting for you. I wouldn't bother about giving her the time of day. I'll take my revenge to make her upset. I would go under the balcony and I would sing this chorus line with my mandolin. Storta va, dritta viene, sempre storta non poghi, spesso male porto bene, può tardare ma da venire. Non mi spostano anche femmine, si minacciano infamità, non mi piglia che un'ombra e collera, quanta felicità, quanta felicità. Sarà tu sole sta città, sarà tu mare che sta qua, sarà chi sa che sarà che tutte guai mi fa scordare. You like that? That's beautiful, huh? That's Storta va, dritta viene. Another good song. Now we're getting close to the end, and of course I have to do this one, but I won't explain it, okay? Because here today, this song is made for me. It's made for me, okay? It's called E qui comando io, okay? And here I command. Quelle stradelle che tu mi fai far, cara Rosina, quelle stradelle che tu mi fai far, cara Rosina, le devi pagar. E qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere, e qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere chi viene e chi va. Devi pagarle con sangue e dolor, finché la luna, devi pagarle con sangue e dolor, finché la luna non cambia i color. E qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere, e qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere chi viene, chi va. Quando la luna la cambia i color, vieni che l'ora, quando la luna la cambia i color, vieni che l'ora, di fare l'amor. E qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere, ogni dì voglio sapere. E qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere chi viene e chi va. E qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere, ogni dì voglio sapere. E qui comando io, e questa è casa mia, ogni dì voglio sapere chi viene e chi va. Well, that's how we get to the end of the program. And qui comando io, this is my way. Okay, well, it's been, thank you very much to the three of you that have come on now, and other people will be listening to it during the week. Of course, these particular presentations of world history are available on my Facebook page, and eventually I'll keep on explaining where else they go once I put them up again. And yep, that's it. Thank you from Tom Padula, and have a wonderful day ahead of you and the rest of the week. So, Tom Padula from TomPadulaTV on YouTube and Insegna Booksellers. Ciao, and after this, of course, you'll be able to access it on my YouTube page. Ciao di nuovo.